This is my submission for my first Linux assignment, the RAID project. This is my Fedora VM that I created with 3 separate 5 GB hard drives on it. I have already set up the SSHD into MOBA Xterm, which is what you're currently seeing. I am logged in as root to make this a little bit easier on myself, and I'm going to just run some commands and hope I can explain myself good enough without stuttering too much. I am reading off of my physical notes because I chose to write down all of my code for some reason physically. Regretting that a bit now, but we'll do what we can. So I'm just showing here with LSBLK that SD, B, C, and D all exist. I'm now going to use the fdisk dev/sdb to create a new partition with N. I'm going to use the defaults for all of these, and then before I write that and quit, I'm going to use T and type fd to change the type of partition to Linux RAID auto detect. I'm then going to write and alter that one. I can then run lsblk again, show that it successfully worked. I'm now going to run that for C and D as well, just very quickly. And for D, and then write that one, and then lsblk again shows that it worked for all three of those. I'm then going to clear the page just to make it a little easier on myself. I like to keep things clear. I'm then going to use the mdadm utility to create a new array raid level equals 5, raid devices equals 3 because there's 3 partitions. The partitions are going to be SDB1, SDC1, and SDD1. And if I use LSBLK, you can see that MD0 is now connected to all three of those. I can use the mdadm detail command on MD0. It was rebuilding. I had run the command too fast and it was still building the RAID. That's why it was showing this as only 2 of the 3 active. I'm just getting ahead of myself. I will then use the command mdadm manage for dev md0 and fail purposefully the SDD. So I've set it to faulty. And then if I use the detail command again, you can see here 1 failed device, only 2 are active and working. So now if I go mdadm manage of md0 and then /s remove sdd1, it is now hot removed it. If I go back to detail, you can see there's only 2 of 2 in this RAID. I can now use this to show SDD1 is no longer connected to MD0. So that is me showing I have failed and removed the drive. I can now use mdadm manage md0 add this time SDD1. It now adds it back. And if I use this nice command to watch cat proc md stat, you can see here that it is showing the live rebuilding of the SDD1 from the rest of the RAID. That command I used was watch cat /proc /md stat to watch this live. I believe that was asked in the submission requirements. Now that it is done, I can go back to the detail. You see 3 fully active and working drives. LSBLK shows it is right back in MD0. And if I type right now /reboot, this sudo su to root real quick, and lsblk. You can see the RAID is there after I have rebooted, and it is RAID 5. I'm now going to just do a short cut to do part 2. Okay, for part 2, I'm going to be creating some physical volumes here. So I'm going to use the PV create to create a physical volume for MD0. I can display that with PV display, which shows all the statistics of it. I'm then going to create a volume group in the same way, calling it RAID underscore VG for RAID volume group for MD0. It says it's created successfully. We'll just display that with VG display in the same way. You can see all of the stats here. I'm then going to create 2 separate logic volume with this command to specify the size is 2 gigabytes and the name will be backup logic, or I can make that backup LV for the RAID volume group. Says it's created. I'm going to do a very similar command to create a second one, which is 3 gigabytes with the name data LV for RAID volume group. And then I can show that with LV display, which shows 2 separate logical volumes, one being backup logic volume and the other being data logic volume. And that was for the RAID volume group. So I now am going to jump right in and make fs xfs slash dev slash RAID volume group data logic volume. This creates the file systems. That's what I'm doing right now for the XFS and the ext4, which I'm doing right now, which is used for the data end, but then I can use lsblk-f to show a bit more detail of the file systems for these 2 volume groups that I've created, or logic volumes. You can see XFS on the data LV and ext4 on the RAID VG. I'm now going to make a directory slash backup, and I'm going to make a directory slash data. So then I'm going to mount the RAID volume group backup logic volume to slash backup, and I'm going to mount the dev RAID volume group slash data logic volume to slash data. I can then use df-h to check where everything is mounted. You can see the data volume, logic volume is mounted on slash data, and the RAID VG dash backup logic volume is mounted to backup. I'm going to turn my page here and move on to the next part, which once I clear this, I'm going to nano into etc slash fstab. I know who uses nano. I like it a little bit better than Vim or alternatives personally, and I'm going to add Control X after saving the fstab file. Control X, and then I'm going to just run mount all df-h just to show again before I reboot the system that they are currently mounted on slash backup and slash data. So if I do a reboot and then log in there, clear the screen, and just going to run if h show that the RAID VGs on, or the RAID VG-data LV is on the data, and the RAID VG-backup is on the backup on boot, so the fstab worked. I'm going to just run a few other commands here I've got written down to show the size of RAID VG and the volume group information here, just displaying that. Are specified already, yes. Just showing the sizes, what everything is using. I can then do same for these two. So showing the size of backup available, used, all of this. The T command, just showing again kind of more information you will want to see. Cannot remember what T stands for. It might be file system mount points on types by the looks of this. I can't remember. I wrote this a few days ago now. I'm going to just keep on going. If I use lsblk here, it can show created a new 5 GB disk here, SDE, which I'm going to use fdisk, if I could spell, and partition it with a new partition, all defaults. I'm going to change it to be RAID auto detect before writing. Clear this, listing it. It is now SDE1 partition. I'm going to go and use mdadm add to md0 dev SDE1. So it is said added. If I list it now, you can see SDE1 is part of the RAID, and it has the backup volumes here, but not done yet. I have to use the command mdadm grow dev/md0, and then RAID devices equals 4 to grow the RAID to actually be able to use the SDE1 space. So it now is included in the RAID. So if I use this other command, pv resize dev/md0, physical volume changed, one physical volume updated or resized. So I can now use volume groups. You can now see it plus 500 dev RAID VG backup LV. There we go. Size of logic volume changed from 2 GB to 2.5 GB. And then resize to fs /dev/RAID VG backup LV. File systems mounted. Online resize required. It is now 652,288 blocks long. So then if I do the exact same, LV extend L plus 500M to RAID VG /data LV, and then since this is an XFS, I have to use XFS underscore grow FS for grow file system dev RAID VG, and then data LV. So that now has gone and changed 785,000 to 914,000. I will now use the VGS command. If you see here, compared to earlier, it has gone from 5 gigs-ish free to 4, which lines up with the 1 gigabyte extra that I changed around there. So there's 1 gigabyte less. And if I reboot, I now LSBLK, and if you look here, you can see the size difference on both of those, as well as the entire RAID, MD0 being 15 gigs now instead of the 10. That's to simulate that's to show the extra 5 gigs from SDE1 being added. I may have forgotten this part. I'm going to pipe that into backup. We'll just do test txt, and then cat slash backup slash test.txt. And then you can see here it has successfully shown a mounted directory having a file added to it while it is currently mounted, which you can see there, mounted on /backup. I put test in a test file in backup just to check that off the list. For part 3, I've just gone ahead and made some empty directories here and mounted RAID-VG data LV to mount data. I've echoed in some just test text files, just so there's something in there. I'm now going to create a new LV size 1 gigabyte snapshot name snap data LV dev RAID VG from data LV logical volume snap data LV created. I'm now going to mount no UUID dev RAID VG snap data LV to the snapshots. Didn't get an error. Hopefully that worked. I'm now going to list /snapshots. You can see the test1 and test2 file are in the snapshots. If I use LVs, you can see the 3 separate LVs and their sizes. The 1 gigabyte snapdata LV origin is in the data LV. Just to show the data there, I'm going to make directory backup, and we'll just snap back. Then it's a backup location there, and then rsync AV snapshots, and then you can see the snapshots there for test 1 and 2. And then I will unmount the snapshots folder and remove with LV remove snap data LV, and to confirm it with yes. So where I originally took the snapshot of the 2 test files is now gone. List the snapshots folder, and it's gone. And if I list the backup snap back that I made, also not there, and data has test 1 and 2. Okay, for part 4, I am on a Ubuntu VM. You can see it here with 5 gigabyte hard drives created on it. Back to my Xterm, I'm going to do some lovely ZFS commands now. So zpool create pool1 with RAID Z with dev/sdb dev/sdc dev/sdd. Now created. So now if I use zpool status pool1, you can see them all here. I can use ZFS list to also show they are mounted on pool1 already automatically. I can now zpool, if I can spell, zpool add into pool1 a spare, which is dev/sde, which now if I use zpool status, it shows here SDE is an available spare, which will come in handy right now when I set zpool offline in pool1 dev/sdb. Then if I go right back to the status, you can see SDB is offline and the RAID is degraded. But we have SDE, which is available, so I will use zpool replace pool1 dev/sdb dev/sde. So defaulting there, and then I go back to status, you can see SDE is right here beside SDB, but it's still a degraded RAID. So I use zpool detach pool1 dev/sdb, go right back to the status. You can now see SDB is gone and the RAID is online and healthy. No errors, no issues there. I can now go on to using the file system commands, which is ZFS create pool1 dataset1 and zpool create instead of dataset1, we'll use dataset2. So I've now created dataset 1 and 2. So now I'm going to make some directories. In pool1, dataset 1, test 1, and in dataset 2, test 2. So now I'm going to echo some files here. So test 1 in dataset 1 into a file of pool1 dataset 1 test 1 test file 1.txt. Same thing, just for dataset 2. These are just examples to show something in just a little bit here. So I've created 2 files, 2 directories, 2 file systems there. I can now use ZFS list to just show their mount points and that they do actually exist. Now I'm going to set some quotas for them with ZFS set quota equals 1 gig for pool1 dataset 1 and ZFS set quota equals 2 gigabytes for pool1 dataset 2, and then ZFS get quota pool_1 slash dataset 1 and a little space here, pool_1 dataset 2. So you can see the values here, 1 gig for dataset 1, 2 for dataset 2. And now we're going to go ahead and so I've made 2 snapshots there, and I will use ZFS list with the -t snapshot to show 2 separate snapshots saved there. And then if I use remove pool_1 dataset 1 test 1 test file 1.txt, then I go over to pool1 dataset 1 test 1 and list, nothing's there. I can do the exact same thing with pool1 dataset 2 test file 2.txt, and I can cd over pool1 dataset 2 test 2 list there, nothing. So now, if I use the ZFS rollback, pool one data set one at snapshot one, and then same thing for the second one. If I now list, I'm in data set 2, and there's the test file again, rolled back from the snapshot that I took there. I can read it with cat pool 1 data set 1 2. I'm in 2 at the moment. Test2 test file 2.txt test2 in data set 2, which is what I echoed into it just a little while earlier. List t snapshot again. Show that they are used there when they weren't earlier. All of this was kind of just me failing to type in some commands. I think that's everything that was needed to be shown. I suck at recording myself and hearing myself talk in recordings afterwards, so hopefully I didn't forget any commands or mess up too badly. Um, Sorry if this is a little longer than 20 minutes. Thank you for bearing with me for this. And before I forget, ZFS list shows both datasets. If I reboot real quickly, when I re-SSH in, I should be able to use ZFS list again, and both datasets should still be there, which proves they are boot safe automatically with ZFS, which is so much nicer than having to mess around with fstab, in my opinion, and I don't know why anyone would ever choose to um, with this as an option. So if I clear this, ZFS list again, you can see they are both still there, which means they are both boot safe.